How Millennials Made Sense of Transactional Distance to Maintain Work Performance, a COVID-19 Investigation. Our contributions from this research are threefold. First, we provide a theoretical contribution by extending transactional distance to the sphere of organizational behavior. Next, we provide a practical contribution rooted in sense-making and change theory for organizations looking to understand the millennial employee experience during COVID-19. Finally, we provide an empirical contribution via data collection, gathering first-person experiences and stories during this unprecedented event. The COVID-19 pandemic demands that employees process a global health threat, social distancing, and their organization's crisis response all from within the walls of their own homes. Practically overnight, life and work have crashed into one another, and for millions of people, the boundaries that once separated coworkers and partners, bosses and children, office cubicles and kitchen tables have vanished. Employees are now expected to show up for work without ever leaving home. This study explores how the pandemic has impacted millennials, the single largest generational group in the American workforce. For the purpose of our study, we chose Borman and Moto-Whitlow's definition of job performance, which includes two dimensions, task performance and contextual performance. Task performance concerns performing role-prescribed activities, whereas contextual performance is related to productivity and team-based behaviors. Contextual performance encompasses the enthusiasm and extra effort exerted to complete task activities successfully, volunteering to take on tasks outside of formal job responsibilities, helping others, meeting organizational expectations and following organizational rules, and contributing to organizational objectives. We chose this definition of job performance as the dimensionality accommodates for a range of roles participants can occupy. This definition also aligns with our qualitative abductive approach as it is reflective of informant terms, the everyday language and stories that participants may use and share in interviews. In our review of the literature, we explored transactional distance, which Moore describes as the psychological, cognitive, and affective separations individuals can experience when communicating virtually. This theory was developed as a product of education moving to online teaching. However, this study draws on the parallels between online learning and digital remote work. The risks associated with transactional distance have the potential to negatively impact employee job performance. For example, within virtual communication, there exists limited opportunity to assess social cues and body language, such as gestures or mimics, as well as tone or effect. Transactional distance also influences one's ability to establish their own social presence and identity online. Naturally, this has the capacity to hinder an employee's attempt at forming and strengthening inter-organizational relationships. In applying transactional distance to this study, we must recognize the tech savviness of our millennial participants. When it comes to being employees, millennials view technology as a functional necessity, not just a modern convenience. Millennials even seek out and prefer to use technology over face-to-face interaction as a means to communicate with their colleagues and customers. Given the pitfalls associated with transactional distance, the technical acumen of the millennial generation, and employees just trying to manage their new working environment at home, we decided to zoom out in order to better grasp what our participants were experiencing. We chose to explore VEC's research on sense-making, which offers an understanding into how employees respond to crisis. VEC defines sense-making as a kind of creative authoring on the part of individuals and groups who construct meaning from initially puzzling and sometimes troubling data. We felt that the COVID-19 pandemic certainly met the criteria of both puzzling and troubling. And with our new understanding of job performance, transactional distance, and sense-making during a crisis, we set off to interview our participants. We interviewed 10 millennial employees from the Washington, D.C. metro area who were all forced into working from home as a result of the pandemic. Our participants spanned sectors such as tech, finance, and real estate, and held roles in areas such as product, sales, and marketing. In our semi-structured interviews, we covered a broad range of experiences. Participants shared everything from experiencing burnout to increased productivity, their fears and anxieties, and even some big life decisions triggered by this whole experience, from switching jobs to buying an engagement ring and proposing. Following the Joya methodology, we analyzed the rich data shared by participants and developed the data structure shown here. The ability for millennial employees to maintain job performance was not negatively impacted by transactional distance. Task and team-level productivity remained high while working from home. Millennials displayed a very laid-back attitude towards remote work. In addition, 3 properties of sense-making bubbled up from our conversations. The first 2, enactment and socialization, were anticipated. Employees took action in order to cope with remote work and looked towards the actions and language of others to gauge an appropriate response. Interestingly, though, participants also exhibited a property of sense-making known as identity construction, wherein participants use self-prescribed labels and their sense-making sieves to form their crisis response. Labeling is a form of identity construction wherein participants self-label and assume a specific identity which they use as a persona to guide their behaviors. In addition, all 10 participants described what we are calling the resiliency sieve. VEC defines the sieve as a consistent idea that a sense-maker uses in order to keep from being overwhelmed by ambiguity during a crisis. This idea acts like mesh within a sieve and helps sense-makers sift through new information and obstacles in order to maintain work performance from home. Within this study, the sieve was expressed as feelings of gratitude for their privilege during the pandemic. Whether due to financial, job, or health security, each participant acknowledged that, relatively speaking, their experience could have been much worse. When participants began to feel overwhelmed, anxious, or uncertain, they would come back to this perspective again and again. The data structure allowed us to synthesize 3 key takeaways from the study. First is that 3 properties of sense-making, socialization, enactment, and identity construction can be used as a method to understand how millennial employees have maintained work performance while working from home. Next, in utilizing sense-making tactics, millennial employees can self-regulate the potential negative effects of transactional distance. If the future of work is distance, then this finding is valuable for academic and practitioners alike. Finally, by utilizing sense-making tactics, millennial employees have created their new normal, a state of working which will require a significant change management effort to undo. The 3-phase model pictured here marries Schutz's 3-stage theory in sense-making with Lewin's 3-step model for understanding organizational change. The model illustrates the change process by which millennials apply sense-making tactics to establish a new normal. This model illustrates how employees have undergone substantial change while working and practicing social distancing. The change has been so fundamental as to invoke Lewin's change management theory, typically applied to widespread planned organizational change. This development of a new normal has profound implications for how organizations plan to resume business as usual once the health threat of the pandemic subsides and social distancing measures loosen. For organizations to presume that offices can reopen and employees can return to work operating as they did prior to social distancing would be to disregard the reality that millennial employees have frozen into this new way of working. Any disruption to this new normal requires a broad and nuanced change management strategy, commencing, yet again, with a phase of unfreezing. The COVID-19 pandemic has been an unprecedented event in both life and research. We hope you enjoyed the overview of this study, which provides a look into how millennial employees have made sense of this puzzling and troubling time in order to maintain their job performance and establish their new normal. This report is a summary of a master's level thesis in Human Resources Management authored by Christine Zdelar and supervised by Dr. Michelle MacMahon at Trinity College Dublin School of Business in Dublin, Ireland.